everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. I am a teacher when I'm not in the podcasting space. And so I'm always delighted to be talking about education, educational policy, and what's best for students and families and curriculum and all of those things. Talking with the author on this episode, Mickey Revenaugh, the author of School's Out, Why Families Are Choosing Unconventional Education, which is out August 4th from Johns Hopkins University Press.
Thank you so much for having me, Jason. I appreciate it.
A pleasure, a pleasure. To start out with, please tell us a little bit about your background in education.
So I will start off by saying, in full disclosure, I've never actually been a teacher, but I have been a lifelong fan and supporter of teachers. My background in education really extends throughout most of my career. I really got my feet wet in education as an editor at Scholastic. For about a decade, I edited teacher magazines, including Instructor Magazine, a magazine called Teaching and Computers, which was for classroom teachers when portable computers first came out on desktops, all the way through helping launch the E-rate program in the mid-90s that wired every school and library in America to the internet. But I really sort of fell into the world of unconventional education, of things that were a little bit outside the norm, when I became co-founder of a company called Connections Academy, which is one of the first fully virtual online public school programs in America. So that was around 2001, well before the pandemic. And we were just hearing from families that they were looking for something different for their kids. Either they lived far from good public schools, or their kid was training for the Olympics, or they had a student with learning disabilities and special needs that they didn't feel were being served well, or they had tried homeschooling and it didn't really work for them. So all the square pegs that didn't fit into the round hole of the traditional classroom. So we created Connections Academy to serve them. And I was one of the co-founders. I didn't do the really hard stuff like write the curriculum or create the technology, but I basically traveled the country helping get schools set up and reaching out to families and hearing their stories about why they were looking for something different. And so fast forward to today, and I have written this book really to channel the voices of those families and to talk about all the different forms of unconventional education that are available today.
Nice, nice. Now, when people think of unconventional education, they might be thinking in one direction or another, but just to sort of frame this up, should families, or let me make sure I get this, I'll edit this part out. How does unconventional education, as you're using it, fit into the school choice movement?
So one of the things that has become really obvious, especially in the last couple of decades, is that what started out as families feeling like they wanted something different for their kids has morphed into something that's a little bit more political. There's been a lot of politics around school choice, which people often read to mean vouchers, for example.
Mhm.
And that tends to be coded a little bit to the right end of the political spectrum. What's really impressive and amazing to me is that families now across the entire ideological spectrum, across every demographic, across every sort of opinion spectrum, are reaching for this kind of education, including die-hard, dyed-in-the-wool lefty liberals like me, as well as people who are doing this for Christian religious reasons. We're seeing families that are religious, but they're Muslim, or they're religious and they're Jewish, or they're religious and they're Hindu, looking for education that fits with their values, as well as, frankly, lots of Black and Latino families that are a little terrified that traditional public schools are now taking authors that look like their kids off the reading list. So it's a big, 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 big tent in unconventional education, whereas school choice tends to be associated a little bit with one sort of end of the political spectrum or the other. What's really giving me hope right now is that traditional public school districts are waking up to the fact that their families are looking for all of these different options and starting to provide it to them, so that there will be universal access to all kinds of school choices for everybody. And frankly, some blue state and purple state governors are starting to look at ways to help create funding and create opportunities for families to be able to do the same thing. So my hope is that if we're having this conversation again a few years down the line, that is not politically coded, that it really is about what families think is best for their particular kid.
Yeah, yeah, well said. And as a literacy podcast, I'll go ahead and mention here book access is a major emphasis, but that's perhaps a topic for another episode. And I appreciate what you're saying here beyond binary politics and things of that nature about the importance of education. What should families be thinking about right now in the current climate and the space that we're in when it comes to making the right decisions about schooling and education?
So I think the one thing that parents who are my age and potentially a little bit younger just need to embrace is that education isn't going to look like what they had growing up. Most of us in America went to a traditional brick and mortar school, whether that was public or private. We sat in rows, we faced the front of the classroom, we listened to a teacher, we sat still and shut up for good chunks of the day, and it was away from our families and often away from the things that we really were passionate about. What's happened really starting well before the pandemic, but the pandemic supercharged it, was that families, first of all, got to look at how their kids learned. So let's say you're a mom and dad and you have 3 kids, and you typically have been dropping them off at school and then picking them up at the end of the day. You might have had no idea what was happening in between those times. And you suddenly discovered that one of your kids can't sit still to save their life and need to get up and run around every few minutes. You might discover that another one loves books more than people and would love to just do nothing but read all day long. And you might find out that your third kid actually likes to build things. And that's really how they learn best, is with their hands. Having seen that as a parent, it's pretty hard to say, okay, now we're going to go back and you're all three going to do the same thing and you're going to follow the same path and you're going to graduate from high school and you're going to go on to college and do the same thing all over again for another 4 years. And then you're going to go into a career that you pick sometime along the line and you'll be set for life, because that ain't the way the world is anymore. So parents have always known and now have a way to fulfill the idea that each of their kids learns a little bit differently. And frankly, the world is evolving in such a way that there's no one singular path to a successful future. And anyone who thinks there is probably going to be very badly disappointed by the time they emerge from 16 years of education and discover the job that they trained for doesn't exist anymore or looks really different. So I think parents, first of all, kind of need to trust their instincts about how each of their kids learn, and also recognize that if you have more than one kid, they're probably different from each other, and that you now have permission to structure school and education around how your kids learn and what they're passionate about, as opposed to thinking there's one size fits all, got to fit them into that system, and if they don't fit in, there's something wrong with them.
Absolutely, yeah. As a teacher, you look at images of school from 100, 150 years ago, they look very much
Very
the same they
similar,
do
very
now. Yeah,
similar. Yeah,
it's
there might be an
interesting how
iPad
that
on the
works.
desk, but otherwise it's pretty similar, and
Yeah.
and I know teachers, the other thing that's driving all of this, honestly, is that the best teachers are feeling very constrained by and limited by the system. And so whether you're
Mhm.
someone who just never believed that a state test score told you very much about how your kids were learning, or you're someone who really loves to differentiate in your classroom, but you have 30 kids and how much can you actually do? What we're starting to see is that those teachers are saying, you know what? I love teaching, I love kids, but I can't do this anymore in this system. And so they're going off and founding micro schools, or they're being hired by a hybrid homeschool pod to be the tutor for some reason, or they're teaching in a virtual school where they can work hours that are more flexible and really personalized for the kids.
Yeah, yeah. With all of this change in mind, and with the kind of thinking about what works best for students and individual students and families, what do you envision for schools? That could be at the classroom level, that could be at the building level, system level, or beyond.
I do not see us going back to one size fits all. And for me, the the metaphor for one size fits all is a building with classrooms. And so, someone called it like, the egg carton setup of most schools, where you have like kids sorted into classrooms, the bell rings, they resort themselves, and and at the end of the day, the building empties out. I fervently believe that the choices that families are making right now and the new things that they're inventing all the time, because there's stuff cropping up that I never would have expected. There's something that an AI driven school where kids are doing academics for an hour a day. And then they're doing things that they're passionate about for the rest of the time of the day. There's micro schools for very special purposes, kids with learning issues. There's micro schools for musicians. There's homeschoolers that are traveling around the country all year in their RV, or traveling around the Caribbean in their boat all year. And all of those things are valid options now. And so I foresee a time not too far into the future when what we know of as our traditional school building might actually look a little bit more like a combination shopping mall community center, where families come together, get different learning experiences that make sense for them. Put on theater productions, do sports, do the things that you can do best when you have a bunch of kids together. But that the district and those teachers find a way to tailor the education for each of those kids, and that it's covered by the same public school funding that funds one size fits all education now, so that it's not just the families that can afford to pay, or the families that live in a state where there's an education savings account, but all kids and all families have access to the whole array of choices. And we're starting to see that happen a little bit now, and that gives me an incredible amount of hope.
Yeah, I think there's definitely room for creativity. There's room for that kind of tailoring, and I hesitate to use the word competition because that's more the commerce, political coded driven sort of side of the conversation. But as a creative educator, I find that's an inspiring vision.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that makes me the happiest is that it not only has room for creative educators, but it really celebrates their practice and gives them a chance to do what they do best. Because, you know, as much as I'm a fan of parents and kids, I'm really a fan of teachers, and the teachers that do what no one else can do. Will find the families that want that the most. And all this thing about like classroom management and don't smile until October and all the stuff they teach you in school to maintain order in a classroom goes out the window when kids are passionate about learning. And you've seen that, I know, in your career. And I,
Yeah,
I foresee a future where that kind of passion is available to every teacher and every kid.
absolutely. My terrible jokes start the first day of school. First day.
I like you as a teacher. That's good.
What challenges, what opportunities do you envision ahead for families and students?
So I think one of the biggest challenges for them as more and more choices become available is decision paralysis. One of my friends who has been a homeschool mom for a little while and was a public school mom and a private school mom, and you name it, says it's great having the whole toy box of stuff to choose from, but it's a big cognitive load for a parent to figure out what makes sense, and how to structure and put it together. So there's a role emerging called a navigator, that is sort of a guidance counselor, smart teacher, advisor to the family, who can help you assemble the right unconventional education a la carte pieces that make sense for that particular kid for that particular year. And states like Florida that have pretty massive education savings accounts programs are now starting to fund the work of those navigators, because they realize families either will pick the easiest thing, or will stumble around trying to figure out the right thing to do. And there's no need to do that. You can get help to tailor it kind of the way that you would tailor a great family vacation, with what are the right experiences in the right order. So I think that's a challenge, and families need not to be anxious or ashamed about needing that kind of help, because the world has become much more complicated in a good way, with all these choices out there. The opportunity, I think, is for families to see that how their kid learns and what they really care about actually is setting them up for a really brilliant and successful future, even if it doesn't look like what they had or what their parents will probably be pressuring them to do. I mean, just because your kid doesn't go to Harvard doesn't mean that they're not going to be really successful. And especially in an AI driven future, a traditional post-secondary education isn't necessarily going to get you where you want to go either. So what we see for families is that kids who love to learn and know how to learn, who have discovered what they're really passionate and interested in, and who've been given the opportunity to learn how they learn best, are really well situated to thrive in a future where they're going to need to pivot and be resilient and follow their dreams in a way that doesn't look anything like what I had growing up, where it was like, check these 4 boxes and you'll be fine. We're not in a check your box world anymore.
Yeah, yeah. And I love the community focus of the vision that you're talking about, and that idea of people coming together around their particular interests, inquiry, and skills.
Yeah. And in fact, well, had somebody tell me today, people worry about kids being isolated if they're not in a traditional school. And then you hear like, what about socialization is the thing that comes up the most, whether it's a virtual public school or homeschooling or whatever. And there's 2 answers to that. One is, have you been in a traditional public school lately? It's
Hmm, hmm.
for some kids, it's fabulous socialization. For an awful lot of kids, it's a nightmare, because they're bullied, they don't fit in, they're an introvert in an extroverted world, whatever it might be. And then the second thing is, families who are choosing unconventional education are passionately engaged in community, whether that's a local community, a community of interest based on who they are demographically and what they're interested in, or a virtual community because their kid loves Pokemon and they find the 500 other kids who love Pokemon around the country, and suddenly they're besties for life. And
Hmm.
so all those kinds of communities count these days. And they're the kinds of community that you can find when you're not sort of like being forced into an age group, and forced to move with that cohort through your entire school career, whether those are your peeps or not. So find your peeps and learn to love learning, and you're going to be fine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm recalling my master's degree, and one of the first classes I had was philosophy of education, where we talked about the purpose of education. So, this next question was kind of built with that idea in mind. If I'm a listener, if I'm about to embark on checking out your book, uh, what should I be expecting as far as your vision for the purpose of education, and then how does your work speak to that and support that purpose?
So I will say that over the last, 150 years since we've had like common schools in America, the purpose of education was, if you look at it kindly, producing good citizens, right? Taking people
Hmm.
from all over the world, from all different backgrounds, social classes, immigrants, people who didn't speak English, and sort of putting them through a common experience and having them come out the other side good citizens. They also happen to be probably pretty good at doing the work, that the economy needed it to be done, especially the work of factories, because once you've been trained to move along an assembly line, you're really good at moving along an assembly line. In this century, we've all been a little bit obsessed with college for all. I will confess that I was upset. I'm the aunt that makes everybody enroll in college in my family, because that was, if you didn't want to work on an assembly line, that was your ticket, to a middle class white collar career. So the purpose of schooling writ large was give everyone make everyone sort of uniform in a way that is probably democratic and egalitarian, but gives them a uniform experience, and then send them out into the world where they have a whole bunch of other uniform experiences. I don't think the purpose of school can be that anymore, because that's not the world is like, what the world is like. So I think the purpose of education today is have your kid find a place where they're happy to learn, and then make sure that they keep that happiness and passion and joy of learning throughout their entire life. And then find a way for them to learn that, they say, like, a fish can't climb a tree, but you put it in the right water and it will flourish. Find the right water for your kid and make sure that they're flourishing in that. So the purpose of school is to bring out the brilliance in every child. And us old timers need to recognize that that's not going to look like what it looked like for us. It's going to look really different. And then once kids have that passion for lifelong learning, the ability to pivot, and the ability to go after what it is that they're really interested in, they're going to be really well set up for God only knows what this future looks like. But it'll look different from now. And they're going to be, as someone once said, the kids are going to be okay.
Kids are going to be okay. If I am a listener and I want to find out more, if I want to check out Schools Out, Why Families Are Choosing Unconventional Education, where might I go and do that?
So you can pre-order the book. As you mentioned, Jason, the book actually comes out on August 4th. So if you're hearing this before August 4th, you can pre-order it wherever you buy books, including Amazon, bookshop.org, or Johns Hopkins University Press, which is the publisher. And it's available both in hardcover and ebook. Will probably be available at your public library as well. And then I've been actually going back and talking again to all the people I interviewed for the book. So I traveled like 100,000 miles and talked to more than 100 people. And I've been re-interviewing a lot of them and posting clips of those interviews online, both on my YouTube channel and on Instagram under Mickey Revenaugh _ Schools Out. So if you want a little taste of who the people are that I'm channeling through this book, that's where you can find them.
Wonderful, wonderful. May the conversation continue. I'd be delighted to talk with you in the future as you continue working. And best of luck. Enjoy the PhD program as
Thank you
well.
so much. Thank you so much. I will be Dr. Revenaugh one day.
That's right. That's right.